Have you ever asked yourself, how is it possible for Adam and Eve to sin in spite of the fact they were already in close proximity with God? I mean, they were in the Garden of Eden, right? And you might say it's because of the presence of Satan, the serpent, right? And that is true. I'm not discounting that. And that is true. In fact, I will even add to that. Because in Genesis 6, it tells us that the sons of God rebelled against God, right? So you still have the presence of these potential evil going on in that place, right? They have not yet sinned, but they are still. I mean, they are potential threats later on. So Adam and Eve was in the presence of God. He was with God. They were with God. God was with them. But there's a problem. Even with God having that close proximity with them, the proximity is not enough. What do I mean by that? Even when God was with them, God was not in them. You get what I'm saying? God was not in them. Why? The question is why? The answer is free will. Free will. Because for God to enter into a person, for God to become to come inside the person, to live in him, for the person to become the temple of God, to be a truly, you know, a true temple of God, the person has to allow God to come in. And that is where Jesus Christ comes into the picture. Because when you study the temple of Solomon, the tabernacle, and all these things, you're going to notice that although the temple mimics the garden imagery, it only provided you a problem, okay? Because it only shows people the proximity that we have with God. You know, we are so away from the presence of God. The problem is when you take a look at the temple, you're going to understand that this is a very sacred place. And the more you get inside the temple, the place gets even more sacred. The common people are only allowed in the outer court. They're not allowed to go inside the temple complex. Okay? They're not allowed to go inside the building. Only the priests are allowed to enter into that first compartment. That first compartment where you see this garden imagery of, trees, flowers, knops. You see this table of showbread and all these things. It shows us the garden imagery. The cherubims are also there in the interior design of the temple, the walls, the veils, and even inside the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, which represented the presence of God. But the problem is, unless you are a high priest, you are not able to get inside the Holy of Holies, which is the second and most holy compartment inside the temple. You have to be the high priest, and you can only get inside once a year during the Day of Atonement. And you couldn't simply get in without doing all those ritual sacrifices and ritual cleansing to decontaminate to decontaminate yourself and the people before you can get in. So it's quite important. It's quite scary. The point of having this temple imagery is to tell us that we need to approach God with with humility, with diligence, with all, with the proper precaution, because it's dangerous to approach God in our sinful state. Okay, so the thing is, it only shows them. I think it only shows the hopelessness of people to approach God. Okay, even when we try our best, we still couldn't have that, closeness with God, that relationship. And then comes Jesus, where everything is reversed. He dies, he becomes that ultimate sacrifice who took care of our sins, who took care of the issues of not just of the external, external, what do you call it? External uncleanness, but also the issues with the conscience, the guilt, the sin, the moral issues. He takes care of these things. And plus the fact that, remember what happened inside the temple when Jesus died? The veil was completely torn, allowing us to have access to God, this direct access to God. And at the same time, not only did we have direct access to God, we also become individual temples. And all of us collectively are considered to be the temple of God. So you get you get the message there. So we become the temple, we become the dwelling place. That's the reason why you have to accept the gospel message. You have to accept Jesus into your life, because ultimately that's what we want to happen. So it's not just a removal of the sin. It's not just taking care of the rebellious people, earthly or heavenly people, but ultimately there must be the presence of God in the life of a believer. We become the temple of God, and God has to reside in each one of us. He needs to take care of cleaning up the temple. That's the reason why we go through this process of sanctification. The more we allow God to move in us, the more He is able to clean us up in order to become like Him, to be holy, to be perfect, you know, in order for us to be, to become the image bearers of God. You see where I'm getting at? Proximity with God is not enough. We have to allow Him to come in. And that only happens when we make that free choice of allowing Him to come inside. And that helps us answer the question, okay, of whether we're going to sin, whether or not we're going to sin when we enter into His home as believers, right? Because ultimately, when you're already there, you're going to be given not just the new software, you're going to be given new hardware, a new body that doesn't rot, that is no longer mortal, that no longer dies. You no longer need to be selfish about taking care of yourself, at the expense of other people. You don't have to worry about being able to to have that, to preserve that legacy, because you are already mortal. There is no need for for all those kinds of things that it's quite different. You get what I'm saying? you know all these things that we have here, it's because we want to preserve something. That's the reason why we become selfish. This is the reason why this is not the place that we are meant to build our hopes and dreams, because the ultimate place is there with Him. That is the place where we will truly find, where we truly belong, and that is with God, with Him, in our, in that immortal state. Okay, and I hope that helps. No, and let me know, what do you think? Okay, so, and if it's possible, I would just like for you to help me by, sharing the contents if you think this is helpful. Okay, like, share, subscribe, do what it is that you do in order to, with that, have a great weekend.